So just a couple of things. Get my slide set here. There was one big development in the last week that I just wanted to cover because we've been getting a lot of questions on it on the hotline. And that is that the CDC changed its guidance around quarantine after exposure to a positive case. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. The gold standard had been a 14-day quarantine. It still is. And you as an employer can make a decision that we are still going to use the 14-day quarantine, so keep that in mind. But under the new guidance, and this is intended to give more flexibility, especially to workforces where you maybe have a fair amount of exposure in the workplace, or maybe you're extremely busy right now and you're trying to get a little bit more flexibility. That's, all of these regulations have a give and take, and all of these guidances have a give and take. And a lot of it is trying to balance the needs of the business community along with the needs of public health. So that's really what this is going for, but I'll talk a little bit more about what you want to do with this as an employer. But under the new guidance, close contact exposure is a quarantine of 7 or 10 days now, depending on an individual's test results and symptoms. Okay, keep in mind, close contact, currently defined as 15 or more cumulative minutes over a 24-hour period, and that's within 6 feet of someone who has COVID-19, and that's whether they're masked or unmasked. Again, the 14-day quarantine is still the best, but under the revised guidelines, we can now allow for the following alternatives. And this is, again, providing that the individual stays symptom-free. So it can be after 10 days following close contact, or if you want to go with the testing option, after 7 days with a negative test taken within 48 hours of the final day of quarantine. So after 5 days, you test, you get a negative test, you wait out the 7 days, depending on how long it takes you to get your test back. So those are your two new options now. But again, still during the quarantine means quarantine, right? You want to be using your mask, you want to be social distancing, you want to be practicing your hand and cough hygiene, make sure you're cleaning and disinfecting, avoiding crowds, and always the best ventilation possible. So this all changes if you develop symptoms during the quarantine, whether it's 14, 10 day, or 7. I was just talking to a member this morning. They had somebody in quarantine who seemed to be doing better and then took a turn for the worse and redeveloped symptoms. So you have to go back into your quarantine. So once you get those symptoms, you are treated as a positive case, positive or presumed case, and you isolate, right? And then the general guidelines for discontinuing home isolation are after 10 days since the symptoms first appeared and 24 hours without a fever, not using fever-reducing medications, and the other symptoms are improving, keeping in mind loss of taste and smell can last for weeks, and we're hearing even in cases of months. So discounting those, but pretty much everything else. So what are you going to do with this information? Like I said, you really need to make an individualized assessment based on your workplace. Pennsylvania has said that they're adopting these guidelines as well. I was looking to see what New Jersey or Delaware were doing with these. I haven't seen anything specific. If anybody has, please feel free to share that. Pennsylvania came out pretty quickly. Governor Wolf said, yeah, we're on board with the CDC's guidelines. But what do you want to do with this? So I think, again, think about your workforce, think about your ability to socially distance in the workplace, think about whether or not you feel like your folks are being compliant outside of the workplace, all things that you might want to take into consideration as you're doing this. Okay, ask if there's a preferred test method for the 7-day quarantine option. I think it's not a rapid test. I think you want to do the gold standard testing because the rapid tests are having more false positives than the regular testing. And then from another member saying, Craig is saying, CDC and TA rules aren't alignment regarding travel. PA says the rules are required. Yeah, the travel is still a different thing. As of right now, it's still a 14-day quarantine following travel in Pennsylvania. I have not seen a change around that. I haven't seen a change around that in any other state as well. And that's a little bit different than the quarantine that we're talking about now. And obviously, the travel thing is a whole other animal, and I plan to talk more about that next Tuesday, and I've talked about it in past webinars. But you really need to, as we go into the holidays, you need to be thinking as an employer, what are you going to do with your employees who are traveling out of state during this time and could be subject to quarantine guidelines? Sonia has asked, even though Pennsylvania has adopted these guidelines, employers or schools can use stronger guidelines. Absolutely, you can use stronger guidelines. You probably want to have a good reason for using the stronger guidelines, but you can do that. Oh, Karen's telling me travel now says 10. Checked yesterday. Is that for Pennsylvania, Karen? If you could respond, because I still saw 14 this morning when I was looking around. So I'll update that as well, and we can talk about it. Okay. We can send out that link in this afternoon's email about the travel in Pennsylvania. Ben, if you could capture Karen's link that she sent to me or sent to the panelists right now in the chat. Okay. When counting days, does the date of test exposure count as day 1 or day 0? I would probably say day 0, but definitely not. I would probably say day 0 makes the most sense. Okay. All right, so I just wanted to give you a little bit of flavor for that. Keep in mind that we still have our Coronavirus Resource Center up on our page. It can be accessed by our members. And for members, please feel free to continue to reach out to Hotline and to legal with any questions that you have. I know we've had a lot of activity over the last few weeks as cases have gone up and the states are getting a little bit more active with their restrictions. But unless anyone has anything else, thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next week.